Hello again. This is Josh Kahr at The Real Angle, and today I'm speaking with Alex Vitenas. Alex, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Josh. Great to see you.
Good, 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 good. So today we're going to talk about land development, which I think is a fascinating subject, which is why I wanted to talk to you. Also, something that up here in the densest state in the Union, New Jersey. We do not do land development like you guys do down in Texas. So I thought we'd talk about. I don't know if you're the least dense state, but you're definitely pretty gosh darn big. So that's why I wanted to get you on the line today.
I would
Um,
guess it's Wyoming, the least
yeah,
density.
fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I guess it's all perspective. Again, coming from the densest state in the union, everything else looks spread out to me. So, but anyway, so Alex is runs land-based strategies. What is land-based strategies, and when did you start it?
Um, well, land-based strategies is kind of the umbrella under which I have been operating for the last several years. Um, my scholastic background, uh, I studied finance at Tulane in New Orleans. I
Sure.
was born in New Orleans originally, and so I went back there for college. I grew up in Houston, so Um, I'm very familiar with the Texas market. Um, I initially had worked in healthcare for 10 years after finishing at school, and um, I was working with my father. He's a plastic surgeon here in Houston. Um, when I joined his office, he had 3 employees. When I left, he had 50, and we had completed a ground up development for a purpose built standalone office and surgery center. And so
Okay.
I had a great time working with him. I felt like I had a great opportunity to give back for all the things that he did for me and in helping him to grow his business and automate a lot of his processes and, kind of get things very standardized. But in 2020, as COVID was kind of getting started, I was antsy to get out on my own and get started. Kind of doing my own thing, and so that's kind of where land-based strategies came from. I had partnered with him in a medical spa. So when we built the building, it was a 15,000 square foot building. The first floor was our medical spa, which I was a partner in, and then the second floor was his clinic, his office space, as well as a fully accredited surgery center with 2 ORs.
If you don't mind me asking, because I've heard the term medical spa before,
Sure.
what is a medical spa?
It is a space that sells retail products like skincare, cleansers,
Okay.
retinols, different things that help with anti-aging, and then also non-surgical services, which kind of focus on anti-aging or weight loss or
Got it.
they're
Okay.
they're whether it's wrinkles or skin pigmentation or excess fat or there's a number of different kind of treatment modalities.
Got it.
Um,
Got it.
but so we built that facility and I had equity in that business downstairs. We had grown that business to have about 8 employees downstairs. And in 2020, when I decided that I really wanted to kind of set myself up for the future and become fully independent, I sold my equity in that business. I took a second mortgage against my house,
Okay.
and I had a lump of capital ready to deploy, and then I went out and started looking for deals without having a significant amount of experience. Um, but I felt like there were opportunities to explore. I was very interested in distressed assets, and so I started looking a lot at tax foreclosures. I had actually kind of started doing research into that a few years before I left. I had attended a bunch of auctions without money and without registering to kind of see what the foreclosure process looked like and who was there and
Yeah, you know what I like about talking to you about this, just to cut in for a moment here, is that, first off, I always find the accidental developer, if you will, more fascinating. By that I mean
sure.
I think very few very few little boys and girls say someday when I grow up I want to be a real estate developer. They tend to say things like I want to be a doctor, I want to be a firefighter, more careers, if you will, established careers. So I find that interesting, first off, that you kind of backed your way into it. And the other thing I find interesting about the conversation is what you did, which is basically saying, well, if I'm interested in this whole tax foreclosure thing, let me go a few times and get a good handle on it. I think there's a lot to be said for doing dry runs and experiencing that. I've done similar things in my life just to understand kind of what the flow of it is before you
Uh,
start putting real money down. Now, in your market, I know in some markets like New Jersey, for example, a market I know well, you can buy tax liens and then you run the foreclosure process more directly. In Texas, is it just simply the city gets the lien, they do it themselves, and then they auction it on the courthouse steps, or what does that look like?
so it's a little bit different. Texas is a tax deed state, so
Okay,
instead of selling, so like I've purchased tax liens in other states. I have an entity that operates in Kentucky, for example.
okay,
Um, and there every year your taxes are delinquent as of, I believe it's January 1st, and then by April 15th or someday right around there, whoever is still delinquent goes onto the list to have the lien sold, and then their auction is in August. So the municipality is only really holding this debt for whatever it is, 8 months from the day that it became delinquent before somebody cures it. In Texas, it works a little bit differently. Here, the municipality holds the debt on its balance sheet for about 5 years, and
mm,
then they sue you. The each of the So when you pay your property taxes, there's like 8 or 9 entities. You've got the port authority and the hospitals, the school district, and
sure,
whoever else. Basically, each of those entities tend to be represented by different law firms, and whoever was owed the most money would generally start the foreclosure process. And so they'll initiate a lawsuit, and that takes probably about a year to a year and a half to get kind of through the court system, and
right,
it terminates with a judgment and an order of sale from a judge.
right,
Um, and then once they've got that order of sale, it goes into the docket to be sold on the next auction. Here in Texas, our auctions are on the first Tuesday of the month. I don't remember how many counties are in Texas. It's something like 252.
it's a
Uh,
lot, yeah, yeah,
yeah, and so they every first Tuesday of the month at 10 a.m. in every single county, they start the auction kind of synchronously. And so if you want to participate in a bunch of counties, you need a bunch of people.
I was
um,
gonna say, so you have to physically be there because, like with tax liens in New Jersey, I know you can buy them online, so then
yeah,
you can just sit in your house comfortably and click buttons, and it's like going on eBay. Frankly, it's just you click buttons and you put in bids, and that's
some
what
of
you do.
them some of them have gone online in Texas, but there's still an overwhelming number of them that are on the courthouse steps the morning of.
Okay,
Um, in big counties like Houston and Dallas, you have too many people to do it at the courthouse, so they
right,
actually use like big event centers. It's basically in a ballroom,
okay,
and so you have um, thousands of people show up. Um, and so I kind of got started that way. At the same time that they're doing the tax foreclosure auctions here in Texas, they're also doing execution of judgments. So if you had gotten sued for whatever reason and a judge ordered that you sell a property to deal with that judgment,
right,
they would actually go ahead and auction those in the same place. The mortgage foreclosures happen at the same time and place also.
gotcha,
So the way the Texas state statute is put together, all the public auctions kind of happen in the same time. There's different rules. So I've purchased through the auctions tax deeds here in Texas. I've also purchased homeowners association foreclosures, which was an execution of judgment, um, and I've also bid on mortgage foreclosures. I haven't purchased any mortgage foreclosures. But what I found is that by statute, if you purchase something at auction, you have a redemption period in which the original owner has the right to come back and buy you out.
Yeah, every
Um,
state has something like that. Sure.
yeah, and so here it's a 25% premium to your investment, um, as long as they redeem within the first year. If it's a homestead exempt property, they have 2 years, and it's 25% anytime in the first year, and it's an additional 25% anytime in the second year. So
So
it,
then in practice, just to cut in, then in practice, like with a house, I mean, let's say now you got the house, right? You bought the deed. They still have a right to redeem within, say, as you said, the first 12 months or something and pay a 25% premium. So you can't really renovate and flip the house, right? Because if you did,
you'd be at
they
risk.
still okay. Okay. Okay.
You can
And same thing
do
with like raw land. You couldn't take raw land and go get it entitled and start digging holes because again, they could just take it back in theory.
Yeah, that would be an issue. Now with raw land that's not homestead exempt, it's 180 days, so it's 6 months.
Okay.
So it's a
Okay.
little shorter, but the title companies don't like to write title policies on things that have gone through the auction for like 4 years these days. And so you can end up in a situation where if your end goal is to flip out, you could get stuck. Um, you could do something like a contract for deed or a seller finance type of a situation where the deed would trade after the period, to try and create some income in the interim. But what I've really transitioned away from is purchasing them in the auctions directly. I now really focus on properties that are scheduled for foreclosure, and then I make contact with the owners and see if I can negotiate deals to be done through local title companies.
And
And
avoid
that
all the
way,
drama. Avoid all the
yeah,
drama.
I get
Yeah.
marketable title day one. And then, I started out, the first property I bought was a lot. It was a residential lot. It was a corner lot, about a third of an acre on the east side of Houston, near the ship channel. And um, after that, I had purchased a few little houses and fixed them up and flipped them. Those projects were stressful. Not having a background in construction, I found all kinds of hidden costs and problems that I didn't
Sure.
expect.
Sure.
Um, and I ended up selling that first property after I had purchased the flips and exited the flips, and I made, I don't know, 100% more on the land, from a raw return perspective, than I did on the actual value add construction deal. So it made me really think twice about whether I wanted to keep buying houses and trying to do the flip thing.
Yeah, I mean, what you're addressing, which is so true, is it's if you're lucky in life, you could do one thing well, and maybe you can do one thing well, and another thing kind of, sort of okay.
Yeah,
And you got to decide, okay, where can I actually create value here? And maybe it's not by trying to do absolutely freaking everything.
and
You
it
got to
was
be
it
able to.
was really about getting back to basics and being simple, right? Like the basic investment thesis that I operate under today is, can I buy it for less than I can sell it for in the future? As opposed to how do I engineer more value and get to this, after repair value with the least amount of cost. And
Right, right,
um,
right, right. And now I'm curious, as far as funding goes, I mean, not to, are you doing, is this your own capital? Are you syndicating deals, raising money? Like, how are you doing this stuff?
so today, 4 years in, I've done about 30 transactions.
Okay.
Um, and I would say that I did the first 10 or so 100% me, no debt. So, it was completely unlevered, and
Sure.
it was, really me trying to figure out what I was doing.
Right.
I was buying, fairly cheap deals. I bought 15,000, 20,000, $30,000 deals,
Right.
for a while as I was getting going.
Not going to get
Um,
rich off deals that small, but still you get your track record, you get your experience, you make some money. Makes
and I,
sense.
I managed to double my money a good number of times
Which is
along the
great.
way,
That's great.
and
That's
so I
great.
saw a great kind of path. And at some point, a friend of mine introduced me to someone who I've now done several joint ventures with. And his background was in oil and gas. He was a landman. So he used to go out and talk to families about their mineral rights, subsurface. And he was great at title because, you've got a lease has 1,000 owners, and there's a
That's what
lot
it
to,
is.
to
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of pull
yeah.
apart. And so he taught me an awful lot about the county clerk's offices and how to do the grantor grantee searches and understand what you were seeing. And he also introduced me to a private lender. And so
Hmm.
we started to purchase properties together. And um, our deal is we probably do 80% debt on most of the deals, and then the rest is our pooled capital when we're doing deals together.
Sure.
Um, and I like that structure a lot. The debt's expensive because it's essentially hard money, but it's
Right.
no recourse. So the property collateralizes the loan, and they give me 12 months to get the property sold before I would have to refinance. Um, and so that's been kind of the way that I've been achieving scale is instead of buying 20 and $30,000 properties, now I would say my average property purchase is in the 200 to $250,000 range.
That's
Um,
great.
and I'm generally looking to exit somewhere around double that, um, with something like 80% of it having been debt. So the cash on cash returns become quite interesting.
No, and it's interesting too. I mean, one of the reasons I ask about syndication is, I mean, there are a lot of people who do syndicate deals, but sometimes it seems, I'm not saying this is all cases, but sometimes it seems like the aggravation of going through syndication, you could have just done one more deal, rather than deal with the aggravation of managing 20 people and all that kind of jazz. That's why I was asking.
I have friends who raise capital and on the equity side to do deals, and I look forward to kind of advancing and maturing my career here.
Sure.
But capital raises haven't been a part of my strategy so far.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, and it's a whole different process. It's a whole different sales cycle. It's a whole different machine. It's it's rather than now you don't have to just justify the deal to yourself. You have to justify the deal to a bunch of other people. So there's a educational component, if you will.
Sure.
It's a lot. It's a lot more. It's interesting.
I've spoken to an attorney about private placement memorandas and their cost, and that kind of scared me away for the for the near term. But at some point, it certainly makes sense.
Sure.
It's
Sure.
just a matter of where you are on the curve.
No, I figured I'd ask. So so right now, like, what do you think your sweet spot is? Like, what size deals do you find work best for you?
Uh,
What
you know,
location? What size? What's your sweet spot?
I like to be around an hour. Um, I don't like to be too much further out than an hour from the major metros.
Okay.
So I'm looking around Houston, Austin, Dallas, San Antonio. Um, my full buy box, I think, is 75 counties or 74 counties,
Right.
that are basically within that in that zone. Um, and the place where I've found the greatest success so far has been in doing subdivides. So my most recent deal that had the greatest outcome was a 10-acre parcel that I had cut into four 2.5 acre pieces, and that was a spectacular deal. I purchased it in August of last year. Um, it was overgrown. There was an old mobile home on it, or some kind of a modular home
Hmm.
that the roof had, rotted away, and there was trees growing through it. It was not in good shape.
It's just junk. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
there was a lot of equipment and different stuff that had just been left out there for a long time. And so I purchased that property back in August of last year. And then I proceeded to send crews out there. We mulched a good portion of the property, tearing down, junk trees and getting the grass cut low,
Right.
making it look open and nice. And then, you know, had somebody get out there and destroy that old home and put it in dumpsters and haul it away. And so once I had a nice, clean looking piece of property, I had the surveyors out. We did a replat, got it set up, um, put in utility easements, got it entitled so that nobody would have any kind of conflicts in the future. And then I managed to sell half of the property, two of the four lots, in November, which was September, October, November. So 3 months it took to sell the 5 acres. Um, and by selling half, I managed to pay off the loan and net around $100,000. And then
Right.
I sold the other half in the first week of this year. And so, that was a great outcome. It was tax efficient as a flip can be, in the sense that I got to realize the second lump of income in the new year. Um,
Right. So
and
you got capital gains treatment because it was pushed out for the 12 months or whatever it was.
yes, and it fell into us into the second tax year.
Right. No, it's it's those are great little deals. Yeah, that's the you find yourself real estate rich and cash poor. You've paid off the basis, so then you have some extra land at the end.
That's it.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
and that's really what I want to do. As much as I can is um, utilize leverage, and then get the debt paid off as fast as I can, and hold the inventory. As of now, the strategy has been to accumulate as much cash as I can. I'm trying to roll my little pebble into a snowball, and ultimately into big boulder. But at some point, the goal will be utilize leverage to do the acquisition, get rid of the debt, and then just hold the land. Um,
by the way, this strategy, the first time I heard some describe exactly what you're talking about, it was actually an interview with Stephen Jobs years ago, and he talked about how at the beginning he put together 50 kits to make a computer, and he wanted to sell kits. So he went to a computer store, and the computer store people said, "We love your computer idea, but we don't want kits. We want finished computers." So then he put together 25 of the kits, sold them 25 computers, and then the joke was he's then like, well, now I've got 25 kits sitting in my garage, I still have no money, now what do I do, and
yeah,
he's like, so we finished the next 25 kits, and then we said, well, now we'll go sell those, and then we'll actually make some money. And he talked about how he was trapped in a cycle of production, if you will. He couldn't
sure.
get his money out, so he just kept going from one to the other. So it's not a bad strategy. People have made a lot of money that way. So it's
Delayed gratification has incredible benefits. It's just
it does.
difficult in the near term.
I know. If only my children understood that, I'd be in a better place. Um, but okay, so no, I hear that, and right now, I mean, I know you're based in Houston. I mean, as I'm sure you're aware, Texas is a big state. Why not? I mean, it takes time to drive to places like Dallas. So, do you think long term you're going to focus more on just Houston, or you're just going to be in these different major metros? Do you need to build up a team, or is it really just you? Like, what does that look like organizationally?
Sure. So I can address my super big area. Everybody advised me early that I should pick one neighborhood and I should focus all of my effort there and really understand that market. And it should
Okay.
be close to me and I should be able to get there in no time, especially if I'm going to have tenants. And um, what I found was that as much as I love certain localities, um, there's not enough deal flow with the margins that I'm looking for. And
Got it. Okay.
so I kind of went the other way and said, okay, forget about where I want to be. I just want to find the absolute best deal from a return perspective. And so, by having this really broad target area, I get a ton of throughput of deals to analyze. And some people I think suffered analysis paralysis, where if you look at too many deals, you end up feeling confused, and then you don't want to do any deals.
Right.
Um, but I spent a good chunk of the 10 years that I was working with my father with a mentor whose name is Philippe Beebe. He was a technologist,
Okay.
and he and I built systems. We created databases and did a lot of analysis on my father's practice to help him optimize and grow. And so I have this background that allows me to sort data and look through a tremendous number of things quickly and kind of identify what the best opportunities look like at the high level. And then, I basically operate like a one-man call center, which isn't long-term sustainable, but I enjoy it. I find the ripest deal, and then I dive in on that one, trying to figure out a lot of these types of deals that I do. The original owner is no longer around. So, you're looking at airship issues, you're looking at laws of intestacy, and there's a lot of these things. There's no probated estate. So,
Mm.
somebody's grandmother had purchased the property and their son had inherited it, and then he had died and his son inherited it. And I'm trying to figure out, did she have other sons? Was she ever married before?
Sure, sure, sure,
You're
sure. Who
really
actually
trying to,
owns this? Who actually
yeah,
owns
as
this
far
type
as
of
the
thing?
family tree, right?
Right, 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 right.
Um, and I find that if you were to hire like an executive assistant, or what do they call them, EA? I think that's what they
Executive
are,
assistant type thing. Yeah,
or
admin.
a VA, virtual assistant. There are all these types of kind of jargon out there about um, getting somebody else to do the work, but the skill set becomes very shallow, right? Like they're trying to repeat the same process at a very shallow type of thing. If the first number they call doesn't work, they might try the other numbers, but they won't start to try and find the other people that are in that same cluster to potentially be able to introduce them.
Yeah, no,
What
you need a specialized skill. You need someone who's more than just someone who's gonna like put coffee in the coffee machine. I get it.
Yeah,
I get it.
and I haven't, I guess at some point I could take somebody in that's actually in my physical office and show them my exact process and the way I look at things. But I get phone calls and emails from people who want to sell me um, lead outreach and call center and all that type
Yeah,
of
yeah,
how
yeah.
the deals are going to come to me kind of stuff. And I just find that I can kind of chase down a trail until I hit a dead end. And once I know that I'm fully dead ended, I X that deal off and I go to the next one of the highest potential output and I dive into that. And so I'm super optimized for the biggest possible return of all of the deals in my current kind of universe. And I enjoy that. It keeps me occupied, and um, it does force you to kind of change hats a lot. But that was one
Sure.
of the things that I was going for when I went out on my own. I was overseeing 50 employees before I left, and I was tired of nonsense HR type of stuff, of people not showing up or quitting without notice, and constantly having to train the next person how to do the
No,
thing that they could
management is tiring. Management is a tiring process, and most real estate teams. I mean, even some of the biggest firms, and I've worked with some very large institutions over the years. And even if you look at the deal teams at the biggest firms, it's two or three people in a room. Like it's
Yes,
not actually from a head count standpoint. Like yeah, there's admins, there's assistants. Again, there's someone putting coffee in the coffee machine. But if you actually look at the people who make the deal happen, it's a pretty short list. You just don't need those many people thinking about the deal to be like, does this deal make sense? So that's not it's your descript. I think a lot of people don't appreciate how many development firms are really just a few people at the top and then a lot of other people executing on tasks. Um, so that's interesting. That's interesting. So one question I always like to ask, and just last question I want to throw out there. Nothing ever works out as expected. Weird things happen. Any fun weird stories of
sure.
unexpected things you feel like sharing? I'm always up for an anecdote if you got one.
I bought a single family home in a gated community on a golf course
Hmm.
in a neighborhood called Cypress,
Okay.
which is northwest of Houston. It's kind of on the 290 corridor towards Austin, maybe 40 minutes outside of downtown. It was a beautiful house. It was 4,000 square feet, red brick. I want to say it was 5 bed, 3.5 bath.
Nice.
Um, it was a homeowners association lien that had been foreclosed. They hadn't paid their homeowners association dues for about 10 years before the
Okay.
HOA finally sued them and took them through the process. Um, when I purchased it, or before I purchased it, I went up there to go look at the house, and I just couldn't believe this house was amazing. And I thought that I had done the best deal ever.
Yeah, now before you go on, how much of an HOA? I mean, how much in fees are we talking about? 10 years of HOA fees.
I want to say it was about $10,000.
So that's not a lot of money.
It
That's
was about $1,000 a year, and so
okay.
with interest and penalties, maybe it was 12 or
Right,
$14,000.
because you're describing to me a house that is worth more than $12,000. So now I'm waiting for the punchline of the
No,
joke.
this is
Okay.
a $500,000 house with a golf course and a
Yeah.
clubhouse and
Yeah.
a pool and tennis courts. I mean, they had
Sounds lovely.
the whole
Sounds
deal.
lovely. Sure. Sure.
Um, and so I had driven up there to look at it, and the house looked empty. There were no cars in the driveway. The lights were off.
Okay.
I thought, here I go. So I hadn't started purchasing prior to the auctions yet. This one I actually attended with my paddle, and I was screaming yes and all
Yeah.
that.
Sure. Sure.
And
I've done that. It's fun.
so this other guy and I kind of went back and forth, and I ended up taking it down for $98,000.
Okay.
Um, and I thought, I've won the lottery. This is going to be the best deal
Sure.
ever.
$500,000 house for 100 grand. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, just how do you beat that? And I drove up right after the auction. I called the locksmith and I said, okay, I want to change the locks and get this place ready to go.
Right.
I drive up there and there are 4 cars in the parking lot in the driveway. I'm like, oh no, like what has happened? And so I don't know if they had gone out of town and had come back in between or what exactly was the case. But the locksmith actually beat me to the house and was calling me to say that he wanted to get started, but there were people in the driveway. There were cars in the driveway. I
Okay.
told him, okay, well, hold on a second. Don't do anything yet. I'll see you soon. And I got up there a few minutes later and rang the doorbell and introduced myself. And come to find out, the home was still occupied. So I sent the locksmith home and explained to them that I had purchased the property that day, and then I was going to start the eviction process and kind of get
Or do you
going.
guys call it ejectment down there when they don't have a lease? It's ejectment, right? Or do you know, maybe you don't distinguish that, but it's an eviction process either way. They don't have a legal right to be there. Okay, cool,
Yeah,
cool.
they did not have a lease, and that did tie into the because what year was that? I must have bought that property in 21. It was
Okay,
June of 21.
okay.
And so the long tail of the CARES Act, which was our COVID,
Right, right.
eviction protection deal, was kind of still going. So I filed for eviction, I guess, 2 days after I purchased it, or so, shortly after.
Right.
I didn't get a court date for something like 5 months because of the backlog.
Sure.
Once I
Sounds
got
about right.
in front of the judge, they tried to argue that they were protected under COVID, and he said, "Well, you don't have a lease, and this guy owns the house, so
It's not a lot to discuss at that
yeah,
point. Yeah.
it was pretty cut and dry." But then they had the right to appeal, and they filed an appeal, and that pushed the window out a little further. And so all this time, they're in the property not paying rent, and I'm scared to death what they're doing to it, right?
Sure.
Um, and they ended up telling me that they were going to exercise their right to redeem the property. So similar to the way that the tax foreclosures work, with the HOA foreclosures, they have 180 days. So there was a 6-month window in which they were allowed to give me my money back with no premium, actually, on the HOA
Oh,
ones.
okay, okay,
And so I would have been made whole, but I would have had to sign a deed back to them.
okay.
So when they sent me that, I kind of abandoned the appeal because I figured they were going to keep the house. And so, I sent them an invoice for the money that I had spent and gave
Sure.
them my wiring instructions. And a few days goes by and I hadn't received any money. And I called my attorney and I said, what do we do now? And he said, well, they have technically until the 180 days to send the check or wire the funds. And, so you just have to wait. And so that put us to like December. And the day that it was over, I filed an affidavit saying that the redemption period had expired, that they had no more legal right to the property.
Right.
And the next day, I got a certified letter saying that I was being sued. Um, and I said, okay, What's this about? And they were basically suing the homeowners association who had foreclosed, saying that they were never served notice of the foreclosure. And because I was the purchaser, I was also,
You're a party
a
to it
party
all.
too. Yeah.
Right.
And their prayer of the judge was that he would reverse the transaction and give me back my money. And so we started on that, lawsuit kind of path, and it took another year. And that year was 2022. And the rates just kept going up. I mean, you'd open the Wall Street Journal on a Monday, and the Treasury was going up again. The Fed funds, just kept getting bumped and bumped and bumped. I don't
Right.
remember. They must have raised the rates 8 times in the period of time it took me to get through the lawsuit. And they had filed the lease pendant, so I couldn't transact. I couldn't do anything. They're in there. They're not paying rent, and I went from feeling like a genius to an absolute moron. You know?
How long did so eventually you got them out, I imagine, right?
Yeah.
Eventually. How long
Yeah.
did it take start to finish?
I sold the house on the 2 year anniversary of the purchase.
Yeah, what you've hit on is something we have rent controlled apartments in the Northeast. I mean, rent control is not really something the state of Texas is known for,
Sure.
but people forget, like, if someone's paying $1,000 a month for the apartment and markets 3 grand, let's say that they don't really have the legal right to be there. They took it over from a relative. They're not legally entitled to be there, right? And not to get into the nuances of rent control, but let's just say they're not. Everyone always forgets that, like, if someone's paying 1,000 a month for a $3,000 a month apartment, that's $2,000 a month they can spend on an attorney to fight you. You
Yeah.
know, so, like, just because you're right, there's always some attorney who's like, well, shoot, I can drag this out for a year. Give me 15 grand. I'll waste time, and it's a better deal for you. So yeah,
Exactly.
it's
Well, in this case, I had spent basically 100, and the lien was 10. So I
right,
funded a $90,000 war chest against myself in the transaction of purchasing it,
right.
um,
Yeah.
which really wasn't fun. Um,
No, this is good to talk about because people, it's there are things that bind us, and that is again, you guys don't do rent control, but it's a very similar conversation. It's a very
Yeah.
similar
And
conversation.
I started, the rates were low, the market was red hot, and it was supposed to be a 180-day deal. I was going to,
Right.
take possession, fix it up nice, get rid of it, and it was going to be my next kind of springboard along the way. And, I ended up doing, I don't know, 15 deals in between when I bought it and sold it, because otherwise I'd have been out of money. It was a whole mess. But
Well, look, this has been great talking with the land business. I enjoy talking about the wild and woolly land business because you don't have to deal with any of the the operational headache of collecting rents and managing staff. It's really just it's pure deal,
yeah, just
which
keeping
is
it simple.
fascinating. No, and that's a beautiful thing. Well, look, this has been genuinely interesting. And again, this is Josh Kahr at the Real Angle, and today we spoke with Alex Vitenas at Land Based Strategies. And I should have mentioned your web address. I always like to tell people it's just landbasedstrategies.com.
That's
I
it.
love the fact that your website has in nice big letters, "Let's make a deal." There's a lot to be said for that. It's a beautiful thing. And yeah, and I've asked the questions I wanted to ask. Thank you again for your time. I really do
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
having me. I really appreciate it.
Excellent.